In Pirkei Avos it says, Yehi Beischa Pesuach L'Rvacha, which literally means that your home should be open for relief. The Arizal says you should punctuate it differently. You should read the words not as a phrase, Yehi Beischa Pesuach L'Rvacha, but rather put the semicolon after the third word. Yehi Beischa Pesuach, if you're smart enough to have an open home, L'Rvacha, says the Arizal, that's the bracha you'll get. L'Rvacha, that it will bring you revach and it will bring you wonderful besurais toivos. I want to wish, I can't say the achsanya, because like I just said in Thornhill and Amakbid, wherever I travel around the country, for Yad La'achim to make it clear, they are the achsanya. It happens to be this evening is being hosted in the home of Dr. and Mrs. Aryeh Shatner. So I want to wish them the bracha of the Arizal. Yehi Beischa Pasuach, because you're smart enough to have an open home, L'Rvacha, it should bring you and your entire mishpacha. When the boys, I just told them Aradas Shlita, when the Shatner boys came over to me, they're like, I don't want to embarrass them because I see they're sitting here, so I'll say only miktzah shvachai. They're like dripping with erlichkeit. Like, I mean, in a ginormous way. That shouldn't be lost on anybody. So I want to wish Rabbi Aryeh and his mishpacha this bracha, that if you're smart enough to have, and the Rav said that it's not only for Yad La'achim, but you, for the shul and for other events, open up your home. And I'll mention, as I mention around the country, not only for Yad La'achim, many people have houses. Having a lovely house is not a big deal. It borders on meaningless. A home, that's where it's at. There's a big difference between a home and a house. And unabashedly, I'll say this in any city that I'm in. Having a house is not the thing that's impressive. Having a home that people are smart enough to open for other people, that's a choshev thing. In fact, if I just can mention a quick gematria, it says that every person should live in a bayis in a home, and your home should bring about the mikdash. The numeric value of bayis beis yud saf is 412. The numeric value of mikdash mem kuf daled shin is 444. The difference in numbers between 412 and 444 is 32. Lave, your heart, is 32. Having a nice house, big deal. Having a nice home that you're smart enough to inculcate and inject with your lave, that's a fulfillment of a Asuli Migdash. And the Rebbeinu Shalom says, I'm comfortable in that house. I only met the Shatners right now, but I heard a little bit about them from Rabbi Cohn, a little bit more from the Rav Shlita, and vice versa. There are people that inject their home with lave. The Rebbeinu Shalom should allow this to be a mikdash, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is very comfortable coming here, and it should be for Yiddish and Achas Gesundheit. I said a minute ago, make no mistake, they open their home, but the achsanya is Yad La'achim. I don't care what the city is in. And Baruch Hashem, Rabbi Cohn and I are Yedidei Nefesh. Shenafshi Kshurei Benafshay. We've been doing this in cities around the country. When he speaks to you passionately about saving nefashos from the hands of missionaries, in fact, I just spoke in Thornhill. The Rav in whose shul I spoke told me a maisa about missionaries. My jaw was dropping. The brilliance of how the missionaries were able to get in and infiltrate. It was just, it was a story that was hard to believe. It sounded like a spy novel. And then you heard Rabbi Cohn speak about the Jewish mothers and daughters that are living subjected to the life in Arab villages and waiting to see what we can do to get them out. So I want to thank Rabbi Cohen and Yad L'Achim for being our Achsanya, and tonight we'll see what we could do to help them. I'll share with you what I mentioned in Thornhill. I'll elaborate it on a little bit more. It's based on something my father Zatzal says. My father was Hagoyin Reb Mordechai Shapiro. It was just last week his 20th yahrzeit. In his classic Sefer Imrei Mordechai, he brings this down as a mimer on Chanukah, and I said it last year for Rabbi Cohen in Detroit. I'll tell you the same introduction wherever I say it. I feel badly for people who don't know this vort of my father's. Because you'll go into a Chanukah, you'll light the menorah, you'll end Chanukah, a few latkes and donuts later, nice holiday. Not knowing this vort of my father on Chanukah, it's a spiritual nuclear bomb. The best favor you could do for somebody is let somebody know this yesod of my father's Zatzal. He begins by asking that the Rambam, when the Rambam talks about what the Yevonim did to us, it says that in the times of Bayesheni, when the Yevonim were strong over Klal Yisrael, and they stopped us from performing certain mitzvahs, the Rambam then says, in their taking away our money and our wealth, 3 words. This is the Rambam. Ufoshtu yodam b'mamoinam. What does that mean? You could tell me what that means? They stuck their hand in my money? If the Rambam means, like most people learn, that they went ahead and they took our money, in Hebrew you would say gonvu, gozlu, shalalu, bozazu. They stole, they robbed, they pillaged, they plundered. What kind of lashon is that? Ufoshtu yadam b'mamoinam. If it means that they took our money, I just gave you both in Hebrew and English words that are way more common to be able to use to show that they stole our money. So my father wants to know, what is this idea of ufoshtu yadam b'mamoinam? Literally in English it means that they stuck their hand in our money. You know what that means? What does that mean? So my father would answer based on 3 stories that happened with him and his father. So he was the baldover to speak about these stories. And then you'll start to get a little bit of a picture of what's going on. The first Maisa happened, I'm living in South Florida, I'm living in Miami, 47 years. When my parents came from Scranton, there was a woman who was making a bar mitzvah for her son. She wasn't affiliated with the shul, but my father felt that it was his achrayus to see if everything was in order with her upcoming bar mitzvah. So we contacted the lady out of concern. Is everything in order? She was appreciative that my father reached out to her. She was fantabulously wealthy. My father gives in exquisite detail how she spared no expense for the bar mitzvah, including the wine had to be flown in from Italy in order to achieve a chilled temperature. If I told you how many tens of thousands she spent, nearing 100,000, you wouldn't believe me because you're going back 47 years. At the end of the conversation, my father asked her, tell me about the pair of tefillin. And she answered my father, Rabbi Shapiro, oops. Who even uses that word anymore? Oops. Who speaks like that? Oops. I forgot about the tefillin. Can you take care of the tefillin for me? But make sure that it doesn't exceed $11. Now that's exactly the way the story happened. You might find it hard to believe that someone could say something vis-a-vis $11. I'm telling you the way the Maisa happened. Maisa shahaya kachoya. You take care of the tefillin, but make sure it doesn't exceed $11. My father is masbir, that's the Rambam. Ufoshtu yodam b'mamayim does not mean that they took away our money. Keep your money, keep your big bank account. Ufoshtu yodam b'mamayim, when it means they stuck their hand in our money, it means, my father's exact lashon is, they wanted to influence, they wanted to infiltrate, and they wanted to corrupt the way that we went ahead and spent our money. They weren't interested in taking away the money. If you want the money, keep the money. But use it to buy tefillin that cost $11. This is a novel and revolutionary way of understanding the battle of the Yevonim. Ufoshtu yedayim b'mamayim, keep the money. I don't care how big the bank account is. I want to influence. I want to infiltrate. I want to stick my hand into how you view what money should be spent for. And my father says that according to this way of the Rambam's understanding, it's the same battle that's prevalent and it exists today. You think it ended a few thousand years ago? Are you kidding me? My father's father, Rabbi Ephraim Shapiro, he was a Rav in Pittsburgh for almost 50 years. Reb Aaron referred to him as the Gresta Masmid in Gans America. The Ponevezh Rav referred to him as the Junge Chafetz Chaim. This story happened with my Zaidi. He had a balabas that was a wonderful Yid. And unfortunately, the Yid passed away. His children who sat Shiva for him, they themselves were not religious, but respectfully they sat Shiva. When the week of Shiva ended, the non-religious children who sat Shiva for their religious father called my Zaidi, Rabbi Ephraim Shapiro, and quote, end quote, asked him the following question. Our father left us his Kiddush cup. He was Shomer Shabbos and we're not. Is it permissible to use his Kiddush cup as a cigarette holder? I guess when smoking was prevalent, it was considered for the rich and famous to store the Marlboro cigarettes in silver. I heard this from my Zaidi multiple times. They wanted to know, Tati's Kiddush cup we don't have use for. We're not Shomer Shabbos. Could we use it as a cigarette holder and as an ashtray? Yes or no? That, says my father in a thunderous tone, Ufoshtu yadam b'mamayim. Keep your tefillin and keep your Kiddush cup. But don't spend more than $11 and use it as an ashtray. They were not interested in taking or stealing or pillaging or plundering our money. All they were interested in doing was influencing, infiltrating, and corrupting how we view money. And my father would have no hesitation to say, you think that battle ended 2,000 years ago? Till today, the Ribbono Shel Olam gives people untold brachos, be it in a physical sense, in an emotional sense, in a financial sense, in a psychological sense. Do you use it or do you abuse it? It's not rocket science. Any time a person till today has the brachos and they abuse it, it's no different than the Kiddush cup as an ashtray and tefillin for $11. My father was clear to say, the battle against the Yevonim, Ufoshtu Yadam b'mamayim, is alive and well today. And how you doing? How you doing with it? He said, contrast that with a woman that he met. My parents were in Eretz Yisrael, It was a Shabbos afternoon. They were davening at the Kaisel, and then when they were returning, it started to drizzle. They were in Meir Sharim on a thin, narrow street, Rehov Chever Shas. Out of number 72, Rehov Chever Shas, an elderly woman saw them and ushered them into her apartment. My father wonders if it could be called an apartment. He said the anius and the poverty in that room that she called home, not a house, a home. He said it was lo yiyuman. They had a hole in the ceiling that was cascading on her Shabbos table. She couldn't move the rolls for Shalosh Shudas out of the way, so she rolled it up, and the water was dripping on the plastic so it wouldn't make the rolls wet. At which point my father turned to her and said, "Isn't it hard to live like this?" And she looked at my father with a tremendous smile and wondering what he was saying, and she said, "Rebbe, das is Gishmei Bracha." Now, it's not the topic for tonight's talk, but I'll parenthetically talk about Gishmei Bracha for 30 seconds. It's a great way to live life. I spoke about this a few years ago on the Tisha B'Av video for the Chavetz Chaim Heritage Foundation, and people will often meet me and say, "Hey, aren't you the Gishmei Bracha guy?" Gishmei Bracha happens to be a great attitude. You could have the rain cascading in, but it's Gishmei Bracha. People, now Baruch Hashem, we have 7 children. When we had 4 a few years ago, so the name of our first 4 children, we had 2 daughters and 2 sons. Our 2 daughters' names are Gila and Shoshana, and our first 2 sons are Mordechai and Yeshaya. If you take the first letter of those 4, Gila, Shoshana, Mordechai, and Yeshaya, it spells Gishmei. So everybody thought that we did it because of this story with my father. They were so convinced when the next child was a son, he's for sure going to name him Bracha. Gishmei Bracha. Their mamash had it all worked out. It's a great way to live life. At that point, my father said he had a lot of money, shliach mitzvah. He said to her, "Let me give you the money." She was hesitant. She said no. My father thought maybe she felt that it wasn't money that came from a kosher source, so he reassured her that it comes from Erlich Hayid and Shomer Shabbos. She doesn't want the money. What do I need the money for? My parents were turning to leave, and all of a sudden she stopped and she said, "1 second." She told my father, "Rabbi Shapiro, I'll take the money." You see, every morning for the last few decades, I daven, she said, vasikin at the kaisel. You got to get up pretty early to do that. I did it last Sunday. It's like at about 4 in the morning, you got to be on the road. Every morning I'm met by women who stick out their arms and hands to collect tzedakah. But I never had any money to give, not a pruta, not a shekel. But if you give me the shliach mitzvah money, I'll be able to be mekayim the mitzvah of tzedakah, and every day when I daven vasikin, I'll have whom to give the money to. So I'll take the money. And my father would thunder, "This woman defeated the Yevonim 70 years ago. This woman told the Yevonim, there's no ufashtu yadam v'mamaynam. Money is to be viewed as gishmei bracha. Money is to be used to help people and give women who daven vasikin at the kaisel tzedakah." And he asked, and I asked myself, there's a microphone if you want to listen. But how could any person with a Jewish beating heart go into Hanukkah the same way year after year? My father would ask, "How are you doing with ufashtu yadam b'mamaynam? Are you from the camp of tefillin for $11 and a kiddush cup as an ashtray? Or are you from the world of Gishmei Bracha?" And he was very careful to say it's the same battle today that it was then. HaKadosh Baruch Hu blesses so many people with gifts of all types. I mentioned in Thorn Elezehu Usher. You want to know what Usher stands for? Ayin Shin Yud Reish. It stands for Einayim, Shinayim, Yadayim, Raglayim. People are very blessed. Are the gifts being used or are they being abused? I made it very clear that even though we're in someone's home, the Achsanya, it's not even Rabbi Cohn. He's representing Yad La'achem. And I said it there, in any city that I speak on their behalf, I say, anybody who thinks that they're doing the work and we write a generous check to support them, that's ridiculous. Where does it say that it's their achrayus any more than mine and we and you and us and we to be matzil the Yiddish nefashos? Where does it say that? These are women and these are daughters that have a life subjected in an Arab village. They're people who are getting caught up in the web of missionaries. It's my job. It's your job as well. It happens to be that there's a group of people who are doing this on our behalf, and the least of which we could do is fulfill Gishmei Bracha by, in a very real, tangible, and practical sense, helping them. Imagine if people go into Hanukkah in a week and a half, and instead of just lighting them in Naira again, you're able to tell your spouse, Ufashtu yadam b'mabainam. The Yevonim lost. I won. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has blessed me with gifts. I'm using them in the proper way. How about using them to help somebody else? I mentioned one other time when I spoke for Yad La'achem, especially when it was approaching Hanukkah. Everybody's going to light a menorah and bring a lot of light into their home. You know that from all of the makos, I'm not including makas b'chayros. What was the worst of all the makos? The first 9, Chazal say, choshech. And everybody asks, what do you mean choshech? The Egyptians did not lose the most human or animal life in choshech, so why, pray tell, was it the worst? Reb Shapsi Yudalevich, who was nifter a few years ago, I was privileged to have shaykhs with him when I lived in Eretz Yisrael. In his inimitable style, as only he could, he would say, you know why choshech was the worst? Because in the earlier plagues where they lost much more, ginormously more, human and animal life, they had each other at the end of the day. They had someone to wipe away their tear. They had a shoulder to cry on. They had someone to commiserate with. But in the Makkah of Choshech, the Torah says, people were alone. And Reb Shapsi would say so eloquently, the most miserable feeling in the world is when you and I feel alone. I feel funny saying it in front of the Rav and other Chashuvim, but any person who's a Rav or in a position of leadership will tell you. I myself had it yesterday and today a few times. People will come to a Rav and say, I can handle a lot. I have a threshold of large proportions of what I can handle. But I can't handle being made to feel alone. The most miserable feeling in the world is when a person feels alone. Says Reb Shapsi Yudalevich, in the earlier Makkos, they lost a lot. But they came home and somebody was able to wipe away a tear, give a shoulder to cry on, somebody to say, I understand what type of day you had, and somebody to commiserate with. In Choshech leiro ish hasochav v'leikamu ish mitachtav means people were alone. And when you're alone, it is the most miserable feeling in the world. How could these Jewish women and Jewish daughters who are living a life of Gehenna in an Arab village, how can you and I, we and us, allow them to feel alone? Does that make sense? Nobody wants to feel alone. I'm sure by now it's a well-known Maisa that the Vishnitzer Rebbe today in Bnei Brak, Rabbi Yisrael, a bit ago, someone came to him. He was making a chasana. The next night, he wanted a bracha. And in telling over his tale, he mentioned he was an alman. His young wife had just died, so he was making his first chasana by himself. The Rebbe gave him a bracha and said, tomorrow night after the chasana, come to me. He said, it will be late, the mitzvah tans. No matter what time it is, come to me. The man shows up by the vision to Rebbe Yisrael, maybe between 3 and 4 in the morning. The Gab is wondering what's so important that it couldn't wait till the day after. The alman, the man who just married off his child, whose wife passed away, sits down and the Rebbe starts asking him a potpourri of questions. By the smorgasbord, how many hot dishes were there? Now, by the main dish, you gave a choice of chicken or meat. How many would you say took chicken? How many would you say took meat? There were probably place cards from no-shows. How many no-shows would you say there were? When the children wore their new shoes, they feel that it felt comfortable? Dessert, was it served on time? And was the sorbet exactly what you wanted? These were the types of questions that the Rebbe is asking for south of an hour. The man answers all the questions, and when he leaves, the Gabba turns to the Rebbe and says to the Rebbe, these questions at 4 in the morning? And the Rebbe looked at him and said, what's the first thing a person does when they come home from making a simcha 2 o'clock in the morning? What's the first thing that they do? They sit down with their spouse and they start to analyze every nuanced cuticle and pitchivka of the simcha. Who was this man going to talk to? Who was this man going to discuss sorbet chicken and shoes with? A few weeks ago, my wife and I were privileged. We made our first chasna in Miami. And I came home 2 in the morning. And without even thinking, we sat down on the couch as tired as we were, and we started talking about chicken and sorbet and shoes. And we started to cry. The Vizhnitzer Rebbe is right. Nobody wants to feel alone. Who was this alman going to talk to? I called him over to discuss chicken and meat so that he would have with whom to talk. My father used to always say, you think you know how somebody's doing? You see the person at the chasana, they look like they're doing fine, she's bedecked in jewelry. You think so? Did you know that when they went home, they soaked their pillow with tears? Nobody wants to feel alone, and today no one should ever be made to feel alone. It's the feeling of chayshech. If we're not going to remove that chayshech before Chanukah, which is the time of Or, then when will we do it? People just want to know that you care. It comes from a sensitivity. I'll tell you a maisa that I've been saying a lot lately, and I'm proud to say it. It happened with my father. That means now I'm the baldover on the maisa. I've said this over in front of multiple Rosh HaYeshiva, and they're so nisragish from the maisa. My father was in Eretz Yisrael about 70 years ago, Toshin Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, and Yud Gimel. He was very, very close to many of the Gedolim Beroisham. He was known as Mordechai Lakewood, he was a Bambayis Rabbi Zalman, close to the Chazon Ish, the Briskerov, the Gesher Chaim Rabbi Chil Mechut. He went for a daily walk with Rabbi Sion Yadler. How did the shaykhus with the Chazon Ish come about? Our family cousin, his name is Reb Shloimke Berman. My grandmother, my Zaidi, Rabbi Ephraim Shapiro's wife, is a Berman. Reb Shloimke Berman married a daughter of the Stipler. In fact, today you'll know the name Bender. Bender and Berman is the same name. The name was not Bender, it was Berman, and some of the family took the name Bender. Reb Shloimke Berman married the Steipler's daughter, which means by marriage his uncle was the Chazon Ish. On the first Shabbos my father was in Bnei Brak, Reb Shloimke, our cousin, took my father to be by the Chazon Ish. So imagine the scene. The three were at the table, the Chazon Ish, Reb Shloimke, and my father. I sometimes remind my Balabatim before I go on, I'm telling you that my father was at the table with the Chazon Ish. I'm not talking, you'll hear a story today. My great-grandfather's third cousin from the second marriage had a neighbor who lived down the block who worked in the grocery store, who in the Zivik Shlishi had a stepson who knew somebody that was a neighbor of the Chazon Ish. I didn't grow up that way. My father was by the Chazon Ish, and it was Shabbos. And the Chazon Ish asked Reb Shloimke what time it is. Now my father didn't understand that question because he knew the Chazon Ish did not use the Erev in Bnei Brak, and therefore by extension neither did his nephew Reb Shloimke. So how could either know the time? Then my father remembered he heard in America that if the Chazon Ish wanted to give Musar to somebody, he would tell it to someone else, and you had to pick up that he meant you. What a moiridika way of giving Musar. You pick up when he spoke to somebody else. My father looked down at his own hand and saw he was wearing a watch. And that was the Chazon Ish's way of telling him by asking Reb Shloimke, what time is it, that he shouldn't be wearing a watch. So my father went ahead and he took off the watch. He chopped right away what the Chazon Ish meant. In fact, parenthetically, before my father was nifter, when it was 50 years later, I was visiting him in Miami Heart Institute on 47th. It doesn't exist anymore. And he said to me, Ephraim Eliyahu, Ad Hayom Hazeh, 50 years later, I thank the Ribbono Shel Olam that at the age of 21, in the presence of the Chazon Ish, I picked up and realized that he meant me. So he gave the Chazon Ish his watch. And then the Chazon Ish broke out into a big smile. He took the watch and he put it on a shelf behind him and he said these words, Gut, Reb Mordcha. Itzter v'osechob ayir mashkin. Now that I have your mashkin, I have your watch, I know you have to come back and visit me again because you have to come to pick up your watch. So I'm so happy you'll be here to visit me again. And then my father started to cry, and he says on the tape, that way of the Chazon Ish talking, Koheles says, Divrei Chachomim b'nachas nishmo'in. My father said that way of the Chazon Ish talking led to more than 150 private visits with the Chazon Ish. Why? Because there's a way to speak to make a person feel special. Nobody wants to feel alone. People in Florida, people in Toronto, people in Australia, people in Eretz Yisrael, nobody wants to feel alone. One of the most powerful things we could do in support of Yad La'achim, I get it. People will write out very, very generous checks. I suggested this in Thornhill, and I'll suggest it here as well. What would be if the people who left here tonight after Ma'ariv said, I'm going to call 2 people and ask them, write out a check for Yad La'achim as well. If you take upon yourself 5 people, ain't nobody going to do it. Who has patience for that? If you wait till tomorrow, who's going to even remember that I spoke here the night before? I don't even think a person will remember what I said, but who spoke there? If a person would leave here tonight saying, I'll call 1 or 2 people, there's something called Yad La'achim. I should be saving them, not just Rabbi Cohn. But if they're doing what I should be, I want to have a chelek in it. I want to show the Ribbono Shel Olam Ufashtu Yadam b'Mamayinam. I use it, I don't abuse it. I want to go ahead and remove choshech. People want to know that you're thinking about them. I'll tell you a maisa just to conclude, to give you an idea of what it means. Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld was walking the streets and he saw in Yerushalayim a 4-year-old girl crying. She was in front of a school. He asked them in school, why is she crying? And they said, today's the first day of school. The girl's mother is critically ill in the hospital. The doctors say she won't make it. And nobody came to pick up the 4-year-old. So Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld got the address of the 4-year-old girl and he walked her home. I could end the story there. You don't have to call an Uber or Lyft. He did it himself. He walked into the house and the house was in total disarray. He told the people in the house, I want you to know 2 things. Number 1, this 4-year-old's mother is going to have a complete refuah shalema. And number two, the mother is going to walk this 4-year-old down the chuppah. A little while later, the mother had a complete refuah shalema. Doctors were incredulous, but it's not possible. What do you mean? It can't be. Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld said, what are you asking? She had a refuah shalema quickly. And then the second part was she would walk this girl down her chuppah. The girl was 17. She was getting read excellent shidduchim. But she was really, really picky. And nobody was good enough. Now I'm going to stop the story now for less than 5 seconds. I've said this story 3 times in the last 2 days, including last night, to a Sephardic Kehillah. Don't think you have the story figured out. You don't. I've said it in enough places. I tell you, you don't have it figured out. So the 17-year-old was very, very picky. The shidduchim aren't good enough for her. She's now 20. A younger sibling wanted to get married, so the younger sibling gets engaged and married. But the girl's still picky. Now our 4-year-old's not 17 or 20, she's 23. The shidduchim just aren't right. Another younger sibling, a brother, can't wait. He goes out and he gets married. She's now 26. 2 younger siblings can't wait any longer. She can't make up her mind. They go out and they get married. Our 4-year-old is not 17 or 20 or 23 or 26. She's south of 32, just before her 32nd birthday. The last few remaining siblings can't wait anymore. They get engaged and they finally get married. And now she is read shidduchim, not like 15 years earlier when she was 17, but she gets read a shidduch, she accepts it, and they get engaged. And like Rabbi Yosef Chaim said, the night of this 4-year-old, now 32, the 32-year-old's chasana, the mother walks her down the chuppah. The next morning, everyone gets up but the mother. The mother died in her sleep. She walked the child down the chuppah, and now she died in her sleep. Thank you. This girl of 32, instead of going to her first Sheva Brachos, goes to her mother's Levaya. As is the custom, especially in Yerushalayim, you ask Mechila from a parent before the Kvura. This Kala of 12 hours goes to her mother before she's lowered into the ground, and she says, Ma, I want to ask you Mechila. I know for 15 years I was so picky, and I really, really upset you. I'm sorry. I'm begging you, bet Mechila. But I want you to know before you go to the Kisei HaKavod why I was so picky. Because I wanted all of my younger siblings to also benefit from Rabbi Yosef Chaim's bracha. I wanted all of my younger siblings to benefit from his bracha and to have you by their chuppah. And once every one of them benefited from Rabbi Yosef Chaim's bracha and had you by their chuppah, then after the last one, then I was ready. but please be meichel me. And the reason that I told you not to think you had the story figured out is because people hear it and they think, oh, I know why she was picky. She wanted her mother at her own chuppah. No, nothing, nada, efes, zilch, garnish. It had nothing to do with her. Her only concern was, I have younger siblings. I am willing to wait 15 years so that younger siblings also benefit from Rabbi Yosef Chaim's bracha. And once you were by every one of their chasanas, then I was ready to listen. O brach bet mechila. Because some people lead a selfless existence. It's about removing choshech. What can I do to make your life easier? I hope, Ezras Hashem, I'm very grateful to the Toronto community for allowing me to speak on behalf of Yad La'achim. It was a pretty big deal to come from Miami. Most people who think with more than 2 working brain cells don't come here in December and January. I know for you this is warm weather, I get it. For me it's not. This morning it was 89 degrees. But I did come. I came because of my yedidus with Rabbi Cohn. I came because how I feel about Yad La'achim. And so I'm asking you, no, I'm begging you, is it such a big deal to impart this message to 2 people before the night's over? Don't wait till tomorrow, you won't remember what I said or that I was even here. Call 2 people and tell them that Rabbi Cohn and his group are doing the work that we should be. I have the same achrayus to save these people, but I can help by writing out a very generous check. And I know people are swamped and they're inundated and they're in over their head. I get it. But I also know that the missionaries are pretty seriously powerful. And I also know that my sisters and your sisters are in Arab villages and are chalishing to get out. It should be the will of the Ribbono Shel Olam. Everybody's going to light the menorah in a week and a half. How choshev would it be if the group that came here would be able to say, 1 minute, before I light the menorah, Ribbono Shel Olam, I want you to know 2 things. Ufashtu yadam b'mavaynam doesn't exist by me. It's not a tefillin for $11, and it's not a kiddush cup as an ashtray. For me, it's Gishmei Bracha. Hashem gave me a home. Hashem gave me gifts. Hashem gave me wealth. Hashem gave me things in any sense. I'm going to use it. I am tired of the Yevonim winning. Period. And choshech will be a thing of the past because nobody wants to feel alone. It's why the Vizhnitzer Rebbe spoke about dessert at 4 a.m. It's why a 32-year-old selflessly waited 15 years. And it's why the Chazon Ish understood that when you speak a certain way, it can change the life of people. Nobody wants to feel choshech. When you light the menorah and you bring in or, tell the Ribbono Shel Olam, Ufashtu yadam b'mavaynam, it's gone. It's not in my vernacular. Choshech, finished. It's not in my lexicon. And Rabbi Isai, as I said in Thornhill, who's to say that in a week and a half we can't light the menorah in the Bayis Shlishi? Who's to say that in a week and a half, if we do the right thing and show HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we appreciate each other and we appreciate the gifts, that when we light the menorah, let this Hanukkah be different. We should be zeicha to the most gewaldig, greatest Hanukkah of our lives. And let's be zeicha this year, with choshech being a thing of the past, and ufashtu yadam b'mavaynam being a thing of the past, which I know is a tangible goal. We should be zeicha to be madlik the neiros in the Bayis Shlishi, b'mheira and b'yameinu.